My name is Grace Guilliams, and this is my introduction. So I'll just go ahead and jump right in. My administrative experience began when I graduated from Denison University in 2019. I almost immediately started working for Columbus State Community College. I did work right under Allison Franz at this time, now Davis. She is in this cohort. So, hi, Allison. She helped hire and train me. We worked together in what was then called CASE, which was the Center for Academic Support and Exploration. The name later changed to Admissions, Welcome, and Entry. I worked as a college transition specialist, helping to create new student programs like orientation, student workshops to help with registration, and primarily I built first semester course recommendations. I then moved to Orlando, Florida in 2021, and I started working for University of Central Florida on their main campus in the College of Graduate Studies. I was a graduate admission specialist for the College of Nursing, College of Medicine, and the College of Health Professions and Sciences. And what I did was help students to complete their applications for graduate school, make sure they were in the right program, answer requests from programs, and things of that nature. And as of 3 weeks ago, I now work for the College of Medicine specifically, which is on a different health sciences campus. I'm a graduate admissions coordinator for their medical program. So now I'm just in the medical school and doing similar work, but rather than for 40 programs, it's for one program, their medical doctor program. One of the policy issues that I've encountered thus far occurred when I was working for the College of Graduate Studies at UCF. So in June of 2021, Governor Ron DeSantis passed HB 7017 and HB 1523, and that was to help combat foreign influence and corporate espionage. So what that meant in practice was that when we were processing applications from international students, specifically students from countries of interest, which I've listed here in a quote from our website, UCF's website: China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, Syria, or Venezuela. If a student was coming from one of those countries, if they had studied there recently, or if they were a citizen of that country, then they had to undergo foreign influence screening, which is much more intense, time consuming, and costly than a run of the mill background check. And any international student had to do that if they were going to try to receive any kind of state funding, if they were going to be a graduate assistant, do any sort of research, and needed funding. They had to undergo that process. It was extremely clunky and took months and months and months. And really, all of the colleges and universities in the state of Florida had to scramble what felt like overnight to follow this policy. And it was a very difficult and just kind of tumultuous time, a lot of unknowns during that time. What we ended up doing in the long run, we've recently changed this, is instead of having all international students from these countries of interest undergo foreign influence, we're only going to have the students who've been admitted and have accepted their offer of admission go through that process. And it cuts down the volume, of course, and keeps students from unnecessarily having to go through that process and pay for it. Unfortunately, it's still going to change a lot of people's plans. They may lose funding, they may lose research opportunities to non-international students. So it's still not a perfect solution, but it is within policy. Okay, is higher education a public or private good? So this is a question that we've been working on, I would say, in the whole MHE program for a while. And I still have some mixed feelings, but I would say higher education, many people feel that it is a public good. I would say that I was one of them before the start of this program. I do believe in parts of it being public good. For example, I do think it benefits all of society, not just an individual. Of course, it does also directly impact the individual and his or her family. But all of society really benefits because those who gain higher education are more likely to be civically engaged, to vote, to contribute to society through being contributing to a competent workforce. And we're also disseminating new knowledge through research funding and research publication that is subject to public use. So in those ways, yes, higher education is a public good. That is why, the government contributes to all of higher education, right? Monetarily speaking. But it's also increasingly becoming a private good. We already know that by nature, higher education is exclusive, it is expensive, there's no equity in access, or it's extremely exclusive, right? And the burden of cost used to fall on the state government and the federal government for the most part, but now the burden of cost is really falling on individuals and their families. So loans are being more prioritized. Things like the Pell are not as impactful as they used to be. Hopefully that's going to be strengthened in the future. Maybe they're going to double Pell. We'll find out hopefully soon. But grants and scholarships are not as prioritized by the federal government or even state governments anymore. And in that way, higher education is becoming more privatized, and it is becoming more of a private good. Okay, so what role should the federal or state government play in higher education policy? So on the state level, it's my opinion that state governments who are invested in keeping folks in their state and contributing to that workforce and the well-being of their communities should invest in higher education by helping people afford higher education. Tuition hikes are out of control, and it's making higher education more and more out of reach. So I think it's a state government's responsibility to invest in programs like Promise programs, to invest in scholarships like the Hope and Zell Miller, but merit-based scholarships are not enough. If we want to level the playing field for historically minoritized students, we need to have more income-based scholarship and grant opportunities. And I would love to see the offering of state subsidized affordable housing and childcare for what we would call non-traditional students, because non-traditional students have burdens that are holding them back from entering higher education or completing higher education. The federal government, it's my opinion that they also have to invest in scholarship and grant aid and de-emphasize loans. As I mentioned on the previous slide, increasing Pell, loan forgiveness. We heard an announcement about that just yesterday. I'm hoping for more of that in the future, more loan forgiveness. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but I would love to see that. Again, just decreasing that burden on folks and hopefully not scaring people out of pursuing higher education because they are worried about what that's going to do to their family or to their livelihoods in the long term. Expanding that financial support again to historically minoritized communities, and then safeguarding and promoting equal access to higher education, because as we know, that is not there right now. I'm in this class to learn many things. So I want to learn about the shifting balance between federal and state governments and their policymaking that impacts higher education institutions, the mechanisms through which decision-making occurs and how that decision-making directly impacts stakeholders. I want to learn about the most salient policy issues right now and what we're planning to see or what we think we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. That's really important to me as someone currently working for, a university, like I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, are. And then I want to learn more about how policymaking differs between institution types and what federal policymaking looks like, one blanket policy, how that impacts a tribal college or an HBCU or an R1 or a community college. I want to learn about the differences between all of those institution types. For my final project, I'm leaning toward option 2. Option 1 is also intriguing to me. But option two is the program implementation plan for part or all of a federal or state policy. And some issues that I'm hoping to explore further are the effectiveness of promise aid programs, for example, the Tennessee Promise or Kalamazoo Promise, no cost or low cost developmental education, which is an issue that I feel very passionately about, the expansion of tuition-free college programs, which I'm realizing now is like Promise Aid. So as you can see, I'm also passionate about that. I'm so passionate, I wrote it twice. The expansion of test optional admissions as someone who works in admissions and went to a test optional school. Again, something I'm interested in. And then free or reduced cost housing, food, and childcare. Okay. And these are just my references. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I'm so excited to be in this class with you all, hopefully meeting some new folks and reconnecting with some familiar faces. Have a great rest of your evening.